Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Beyond the Peloton podcast. I'm your host, Spencer Martin from Beyond the Peloton newsletter. I'm here with my co-host, Andrew Vontz from the Choose the Hard Way podcast and the BetterLab.io. We are discussing the recent Tour de Suisse. Will UAE sweep the podium at every race from here until the end of time? A little bit of Tour de France prep, and then finishing off our Unchained, our Netflix Tour de France Unchained review, recap, gripes, praise, whatever you want to call it. But Andrew, do you want to plug anything before we get going?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd like to give a shout out to the exotic bird store where Spencer is located right now.
Yes, it's a exotic location, an outdoor patio next to a parking lot at an Ibis in Colmar, France. I would guess that this has been the scene of a Tour de France rest day press conference at some point. It has big rest day vibes to it. It is a wonder. I mean, this podcast is now brought to you by Ibis. I will be working here for the next month, so I don't want to offend them, but I saw some suspect ones on the way into town. I wouldn't want to get stuck at some of these off the beaten path hotels during the tour.
Yeah, and I mean, and when you're at a hotel and on the road, it's the perfect time to think about getting better sleep. So if you're listening to this and you're a human and you sleep, and I know you are, please go check out the Better Lab app. It's now live in the Apple App Store. Download it, give it a try. You can DM me at HardwayPod and tell me what you think. The Better Lab helps you build mindful, science-backed practices to sleep better that stick. No device required. So go check it out and let me know what you think. Spencer, how you doing? You're in France.
Yeah, I need the Better Lab. My Lord.
Yeah.
Flying halfway around the world, or I guess all the way around the world. I don't know. With your kids, with 2 months worth of stuff, not easy, I'd say. And then the flight was tough, and then the road trip through Germany. That was not, I would not say that was a high point. That was like 2 days ago, and I feel like I'm just now recovering. The kids are bouncing all over the apartment. I'm wondering what the heck I was doing, but you know what? I'm excited for the tour. We're all excited for the tour. We're all excited to get out of this apartment, get on the road. So yeah, reviews are good. And I mean, with the heat dome in the U.S., my Lord, you really can't complain about the weather here. And I think that's like a funny thing I've picked up. We have had good weather, but the tour is always talked about as if it's like 150 degrees. So like, can you believe this heat? And like, it is humid, but it actually is quite a agreeable weather compared to where we're from, Andrew, where you probably can't even go outside for 3 months of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And Spencer, I know listeners want to know, am I going to be making a tour team? I do want to let everybody know this week I have been in the heat dome here in Hope, Maine. Yesterday, I got out for a 2-hour ride. It was 95 degrees, 100% humidity. And by the time I finished, I felt like I was going to vomit for a while after I got off the bike. And then I kind of was laughing at myself because I know you had the same experience growing up. When I was a kid, I would go mow lawns for 10, 12 hours a day when it was 105 degrees with 100% humidity. And then I would go ride at night, or on my off day, I'd go out and do a training ride when it was 105 degrees. And I remember picking up Bicycling magazine. This would happen every year because they would always have something about training in the summer, training in heat. And I remember they would have a chart, and it was like, if it's more than this temperature or this humidity, like, just don't get on a bike. And I thought I would never ride a bike.
Yeah, you're never going to go because it's either you're exceeding the heat maximum, or it's too cold, or your bottles are freezing. Yeah. That's what I use. It's like, if my bottles are freezing after 10 minutes, I can't ride. That was always the test. So if you're in the Midwest, you're never riding in safe conditions at any point.
Yeah. Yeah. And look for a future episode. I was thinking about this. I do want to do an episode just focused on Steve Tilford. And if you're not familiar with Steve Tilford, one of the greatest legends of American cycling. And I feel like we really need to do an episode maybe dedicated to Steve and taking a look at some of his writing on his blog, which I believe is still up, and you should go check out. So Spencer, I got to just to get to some of the material we're going to talk about today. Now that you're in France, the critical question is, did your bike make it there without getting broken? Because it sounds like you had a lot of travel, and all I'm thinking about is you got 2 kids, you got everything for 2 months, you got a bike. What are you in? Do you have a bus? How are you moving stuff around?
Well, we brought 2 bike bags, if you can imagine, kids' bikes and my bike, all shoved in there.
Commitment.
We did get a rather large taxi to pick us up from the airport. But what we had in bikes, we had to share one suitcase between all four of us for clothes. So we had to like skimp on clothing, but we have a lot of bikes. It's funny you ask. I was just thinking about you. I just unpacked the bike last night. Looks fantastic. Not a scratch. Ventum gave me an NS1 to come to France with to do some rides and enjoy the French scenery on. So thank you, Ventum. I unpacked it. It looks good as new because I actually wrapped it up, Andrew, like you do, where I actually put bubble wrap and foam around it. And apparently that works and keeps your bike from getting scratched. So the 150th time I've flown with the bike, I actually didn't get a scratch on it because I took care of it.
That's incredible. And did you upgrade your bike bag, or are you still with the old standard?
I'm with the Pika Packworks, which feels like your bike is going to be like crushed. The moment you drop it off, you're like, well, that's it. Last time I ever ride that bike. But it actually, I think part of like taking it apart, you kind of put it in a position, the handlebars are in, the seat's off. And I don't know. I've never had a problem with it. I've flown with it a ton in soft-sided bags and never had a broken bike, knock on wood. But yeah, I did see a lady. There was like a lady at the Munich airport. She just picked up her bike with the Scion bag, and I was pretty jealous. Rolled it right out of the airport, probably unpacked it, rode it that afternoon. So, I mean, that always looks tempting. But, keeping your handlebars on, like what is it? What do they say in economics? There's no free lunch. That feels like you're cruising for bruising at some point.
It feels risky. And we did, I don't remember if I can mention this or not, so I won't say who the person is, but you and I did talk to someone recently, and they had their bike crushed in a Scion bag. They had 15 good trips, and the 16th trip wasn't a good one. But I've had my eye on that bag for a while.
I was pretty jealous when I saw this lady just rolling it out. I was like, oh, man.
Yeah, it's usually a triathlete, I feel like. On my last trip with my bag, when I went to Minneapolis to gravel race, and, I pretty much fully disassembled my bike. I have a Dakine bag that I got for free as a journalist. I think in 2003 or 2004, I wrote about it in, 2 or 3 different magazines. They got their money's worth. That is actually how it works. And I've been using this bag for 20 years, but I more or less completely disassemble my bike. But it does arrive in good shape. It's a hard case on one side, and then it's got a soft top. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good bag. Something about taking it apart, it's a total pain in the behind. And I used to have what is it called? Oh man, I'm blanking on the name, but you have to take it like fully apart, like fork off everything but the crank comes off.
The Oru case.
Oru
had the Oru case.
Yeah, it's a beautiful
the
case.
Stealth bag.
But that thing that is really a pain.
Sorry, I just said there's a patio umbrella that
it's like flying around.
Yeah.
It is getting air.
Yeah, I feel like Spencer's a targeted individual. So Spencer, for people who don't know, including me, what are you doing in France? What are you going to be doing during the tour? What's happening?
Well, can
you talk about it?
The main reason I came was I was sick of the time zone during the tour. When doing the newsletter and the multiple podcasts every day, waking up 5:36, coverage starts at I think the TV coverage starts at 4:35 a lot of the days. You can cheat a little bit, start later, rewind, but then you're working right through the meat, especially if you have kids. Like that's the meat of your dad duties, like 9, 10, 11, 12, noon, and then the days were kind of miserable. So I thought, what am I doing? Like I could just be doing this on a different time zone. I wanted to go to some tour stages, do some on the ground content, and just be a part of the race, see some stages.
Nice.
I could have flown over for like 4 or 5 days. That seemed a little inefficient because it's hard for me to be away for 3 weeks at a time from the family. And I thought, why not just move the whole family there and then go to some stages as I need to on the TGV train system? And that's what we're doing. So I'll be at some stages on the ground, and then also coming back and forth from my home base in Colmar. And if you're a listener that knows any good riding in the Colmar region in the Alsace, let me know. I'm all ears. There's no Rafa clubhouse here. I'm lost without that.
Spence, for everyone who tuned into the Scott McGill episode, and if you missed that, you got to go back and listen to it. It's one of my favorites. Scott McGill, legend of the sport. I'm wondering if you followed the McGill nutrition protocol on the flight over. And if you don't know the McGill nutrition protocol, for if you're 2 days out from an intercontinental flight to go race in Europe, he likes to get on the plane with 2 hoagies, so probably 2 footlongs, to get him through and to be fully carved up when he arrives to race? Is that kind of your protocol?
I don't think we hit those benchmarks. We tried. We had some sandwiches in the seats. You go straight. If you got kids, you go straight to the seats. No muck about in the airport. But, I don't know. I would say I've not been at my best physically since we arrived, and I actually have been thinking about Scott a lot. I cannot believe they race 2 days after they arrive. That is crazy. I've been doing runs every evening, and I'm so slow because my body is destroyed from the travel. So I think if Scott arrived like a week and a half before a race, he might be the best cyclist on the planet. We just don't know.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah. I think, we might need to start a GoFundMe. We need to get McGill to Europe 2 weeks before his next big race. I think,
if we could raise €250, we could probably get him an apartment for a week.
Yeah. But he's won coming off of that travel schedule. I seriously think that there's some money ball play for some team out there with Scott McGill. He needs to get picked up. He needs to go to the World Tour in 2025. I want to see it happen. It starts here. It starts today.
That's a good point. Think about that national championships. Those 3 guys he was with, mega talents, like massive talents. He's 4th, and then he beats Alexei Vermeulen in 5th, who was on Visma. They were Jumbo NL at the time or whatever. Yeah. So those are 4. The top 5 are full. The top 5 has 4 guys that are World Tour riders, and McGill's the 4th or the 5th. So it kind of stands to reason that he probably should be on a World Tour team. But Andrew, before I run out of batteries on my computer and my microphone,
let's do it.
Tour de Switzerland. Yeah. Just to sum this up, the Tour de Switzerland, kind of always a weird race, was a particularly weird race this year because I think it's because of the tragic, passing of Gino Mader last year. Did you notice no downhill finishes? It was all uphill finishes. So stage 4, 5, 6 uphill finish. Or stage 4, 5, 6, 7, all summit finishes. Pretty hard, too. Stage 8 time trial with an uphill finish. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 uphill finishes in a row, 3 kind of sprint stages, 2 sprint stages and a TT. So not the most exciting route. What we learned was UAE is absolutely flying. Joao Almeida wins the final time trial, gets 2nd overall. I thought he was going to catch him, but he didn't. Adam Yates held on to win by 22 seconds. Mateusz Skelmoza in 3rd, the winner of last year's Suisse. But he's 3 minutes behind Yates. Bernal's 3:12. He's in 4th. Matthew Riccatello in 3:31 in 5th. And then Tom Pidcock, Enric Mas, Oscar Onley, Wilco Ketterman, Felix Gall. Riccatello, incredible ride. Unbelievable he's not going to the Tour. But if you're any other team other than UAE, it's holy smokes. We're getting crushed. They're getting crushed by UAE domestiques at the Tour. And Bernal's supposed to be leading the team. Skelmoza, I'll give a pass because he's probably supposed to be working for Theo Gegenhardt. I don't know how that's going to work because Gegenhardt was injured at the Dauphiné, and he's not really a top tier GC rider at the moment. So that's a good result for him. But if you're Pidcock, Bernal, Enric Mas, panic light should be flashing because if you can't beat Adam Yates and Joao Almeida, I hate to break it to them, but they have a guy that's even better on that team. I do think people are a little out of control. They're UAE sweep, put it in the bag, already happened. They're going to sweep the podium. It's wait a second. Have you watched the Tour before? One of those guys will crash out in the first week, or at least crash and lose their GC hopes. Someone has to pull. You can't just have 4 GC. If you have Juan Ayuso, Tadej Pogacar, Adam Yates, Joao Almeida, they can't all ride for their own GC. Someone's going to have to lose time at some point. And we're really thinking Joao Almeida, Mr. I lose minutes randomly in the first 15 stages of Grand Tours, isn't going to have a bad day at the Tour de France. I'm not totally buying that. So UAE will be good. Best team in the race, I'd say, by far. But they will probably, a podium sweep is unlikely, especially when you have guys like Primož Roglič, who you said we kind of short shrifted after the Dauphiné. If you look at his power numbers on a lot of those climbs, or at least his estimated power numbers, I have a little calculator where I can put in all the variables and it spits out a power number for me. It's about equal to Yates and Almeida. So if you thought they looked amazing at Suisse, then you have to say Roglič looks about the same as them. But what are your thoughts on this? Are we just living under the reign of UAE from now on?
I'm most interested in looking at the delta between Bernal and Pidcock. I believe I don't remember. Is Bernal going to the Tour? I feel
they're
like
all going. Think of any rider on Ineos, they're going, and they're riding for GC, baby.
Yeah. So when we talk about Unchained here in a minute, we know what Pidcock's attitude is. And I just think this Ineos train wreck is going to be really interesting to watch. I'm looking forward to talking about the Ineos approach to management and how they try to leverage Pidcock's autonomy to get him to try to play ball, which did not work, of course. And then I'm thinking about what we saw, I think it was yesterday or the day before, that there's a great article that came out about UAE. The title, it's in Velo. The title of the story is "They Know Pogačar is number one." Like on UAE, they have one leader. There's no the road decides. Everybody who's going to the Tour knows exactly what they're going to do. I mean, the quote from the team was, "I was clear from the moment I spoke to new riders about joining the team. They will have their space, but when Tadej is there, they will ride for him." That's how you win a Tour de France.
I totally agree. I think it's gotten out of control, obviously. The big example is Visma at last year's Vuelta. Like, you needed to pick a leader there before they did, because that was a mess. They got away with it because they were so good. But this is going to sound like a little like I'm just saying things to say things. But if Tadej was on Ineos, it's not unbelievable to I can almost imagine the article of Dave Brailsford, well, he hasn't won the Tour in 2 years. So should he really be undisputed leader? Because we have other good guys on this team. Why wouldn't Adam Yates lead it? Let's let the road decide. They had Geraint Thomas for years, who was very, very good. He won the Tour, and they didn't back him the next year. In 2019, I know that he was out of shape, and especially early season 2019, Geraint Thomas was maybe the most closest we'll ever get to what if someone just didn't train during the winter and tried to race? What would they look like? That's what they might look like. But I don't know. Yeah, that's wild that they had the defending champion and they didn't go into the race saying he's our leader. It's we'll see. Well, we'll see with Bernal. And they got away with it at times. They did the same thing with Wiggins. He wins. They don't back him. They give Froome. So it worked. But I agree with you. You just got to pick. You got to pick one and go for it, because the road decide nonsense just always leads to trouble.
Yeah, lettheroaddecide.com. I'm sure someone owns that URL. It's a good one. Yeah.
So cool the Jets on UAE. They're very good. The chances of a podium sweep are, I would say, unlikely. There's a reason that doesn't happen very often, especially at the Tour de France. Don't forget about Matteo Jorgensen at your GC Wout van Aert. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but he's skinny enough and powerful enough. I mean, that's the last time I checked. That's kind of what climbing is. Can you put out power and then not be really, 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 really heavy? And you'll be a good climber. I think people forget that. Adam Yates, yes, he's going incredibly well, but he's very light and he's not putting out super, super massive raw power numbers. So if someone can put out really big power numbers, they can stay with them. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, sorry, I'm blitzing you. I've not talked to you about this even offline. Did you see Anna van der Breggen is coming out of retirement?
I did. Yeah.
This is really, really interesting and strange. So just to give people background,
yeah,
Anna van der Breggen used to be Demi Vollering, was the dominant female cyclist. She's 34 years old years old right now, retired in 2021. Demi Vollering's leaving SD Works to go to FDJ in the next offseason. Anna van der Breggen retired in 2021, has been a director for the team, is coming out of retirement. It kind of seems like they're just trying to replace, they're hey, instead of paying Demi Vollering the €1 million a year she's asking for, why don't we just have a director race? It feels really like a bad idea. This is not going to work. It feels cheap. They're just trying to replace the world's best cyclist with the world's used to be best cyclist. And this usually doesn't work out well when you've been out of the game for 3 seasons and then you come back. What are your thoughts on this?
Clearly she's a killer. She wants another taste, right?
Yeah, it actually, I mean, I don't know her and I don't know anything about her work. It kind of speaks, it's not great for, I don't know, you shouldn't have a director that wants to race, if you know what I mean. You should never have a coach in any sport that thinks I want to be out there competing in the sport, I think that just doesn't lead you to a good place as someone that needs to be like guiding people and teaching people. You know, like when Michael Jordan was running the Wizards and they were awful, and then he's like, I can do it better than these kids. And then he came out of retirement to play for the Wizards. This is kind of what this feels like, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's got a little bit of that vibe. And I mean, if you listen to the previous episode where we got into Tulsa Tough, and by the way, we've been in contact with Moritz, and he may join us on a future episode. He was running 172.5 cranks and 55-30 chainring combo, or 55-36. I've been messaging with him.
That's a big chainring to run in a crit. Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, so I think there was a bit of that. You know, we have to be careful when we have Spencer talking about like the whole Tulsa Tough experience, because, you know, some salad days for him.
Yeah. But the thing is, if I went to Tulsa Tough to like coach a team, I would at no part of my mind would think I could get, I want to be out there or I could do well. You know, I'm like so divorced from that, where I think if I was like, I could race better than these kids that I'm trying to coach, I don't think I'd be very good at it. I just wouldn't be in the right mindset.
Yeah, it's maybe to hop over to Unchained for a moment, because part of what I'm thinking about right now is I'm thinking about the Rudhoff brothers, and there was a very brief.
I just watched.
I don't know if you remember this, but there was like a very brief shot in Unchained of one of the Rudhoffs outside the hotel on a turbo trainer with Zwift set up on like a little stand in front of him, like after a stage. It just really struck me. I mean, I know that a lot of these directors, like Vino, I think, is still racing Ironman triathlons and winning age group titles. Like, I think he's a world champion age grouper. But I'm just wondering, coming off the bench to go back to racing at the World Tour level for Anna van der Breggen, I don't, after 3 years, like, man, like, what has she been up to? That's what I'm thinking. Like, has she maintained a World Tour training load? It just seems, with the level the sport is at now. And I mean, we have Galacticos in men's World Tour racing and women's World Tour level racing. Like, can you really come back, even if you're that good, after 3 years on the bench and have a realistic chance of winning? I guess we're going to find out. It just seems like a tall order.
Yeah, and I should say, I don't know this for certain. It's just my intuition that the level in women's cycling, even more than men's, is like so much higher than it was, let's say, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Like, shit, what did she win? The 2016 Rio Olympics. That's 8 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
The level is so much higher now. Like, the watts that these women are putting out, and even, you know, people that you would say are mediocre GC riders, like the woman, let's just say, getting 10th at the Tour de France, the Femmes Tour de France last year, would be like crushing people 15 years ago. And that's why Marianne Vos was a GC rider, and like, she's still very good. She's not a GC rider anymore. Like, she is a stage hunter, sprinter, classics racer, because the level just got too high for her to get away with that.
Yeah. I'd love to see Jeannie Longo come back.
Remember Genevieve Jensen?
She's
making a comeback.
Yeah.
Or Taylor Finney's mom, Connie Carpenter. She's coming back. It's catching on. We're going to have them all at the tour. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, actually, like, you know, maybe something that would be more analogous would be Valverde next year says, hey, actually, I'm coming back to the World Tour.
You know,
right?
But
I could see him doing it.
He's been training like probably as much.
I know.
I just
He's a madman.
I don't know how much Anna van der Breggen's been training, and I don't think the director lifestyle is conducive to being in very good shape. I did think that was a really interesting shot of Christoph Rudhoff working out, like getting his sweat on.
You noticed it too, huh?
Yeah, I actually, because the first time I watched it, I was distracted and I thought it was a rider. And then this morning I was like, wait a second, like, let me go back and look at that. And it was him. And it's a really important little cutaway, because it shows you just kind of how intense he is and how seriously he takes his job, but like also his physical fitness. And I'm sure he's thinking like, a fit body is a fit mind. And it's just, the whole ethos about the team can be summed up in that one shot. But do you remember like 10, 15, 20 years ago, like, coaches were supposed to be fat? Like, you went to Rockhurst, the famous football factory. I'm sure your football coach was fat, and like, that was what you're just supposed to be.
Actually, no, not true. Coach Tony Severino was always in great
ahead
shape.
of his time.
Yeah, all Rockers football. I didn't play football, but all Rockers football coaches in great shape. I ran cross country and was terrible at it, but my coach, Dr. Jorge Teresito, was like, he looked like an elite world-class runner. So that
Would he run with you
wasn't
guys?
going down at Rockers.
Oh yeah. If I was a high school cross country coach, I'd be out there.
Yeah. Yeah, completely. Yeah.
But yeah, like now the trend is like you have to be fit. Like all these NFL coaches are really fit, except Andy Reid. He's bucking the trend. But
yeah, and he's winning, by the way.
Yeah, so maybe there is something to that. He's too busy to.
Yeah.
I feel like every time I open ESPN, the app, it's like Chiefs player arrested for something terrible.
Yeah.
Like what is going on with this team?
Yeah. Yeah, it's going down.
So Tour de France Unchained episodes 4 through 8. We'll sum up this block, and then that frees us up next week. And next week, just to focus on the tour. I'll just list off the episode names. We don't have to go through them one by one, but we can give people an anchoring point. So episode 4 is for Gino. It kind of focuses on the Bahrain Victorious team losing their teammate Gino Mater. It also touches on a bit of Ashe Douer and their Ben O'Connor, Felix Gall situation. Episode 5, The Enemy Within. That was a great episode about Ineos and the dynamics within that team. Episode 6, Domination, about the stage 16 time trial. Jonas Vingegaard crushing it. And I guess the suspicion. I don't know. I want to talk to you about that afterward. Episode 7, Kamikaze Mission. I don't know. I feel like kamikaze, we need to retire that as a word. Kind of a weird word to be thrown around there. But that's about Soudal Quickstep. Oh, we lost our sprinter. What are we going to do? Oh, stage win pops out of the woodwork. Who saw that coming? Episode 8, The Last Dance, Thibaut Pinot, stage 20. Great. These are great, like, last 4 stages of the race. Stage 18, 19, 20, and 21. All great stages, even though the GC was over by then. But episode 8, The Last Dance, is about Thibaut Pinot riding through his home region. Very close to here, actually. And the final day on the Champs-Élysées, I would say, even though I knew Jordi Meus won that stage, I guess I intellectually knew that. I was shocked to see it happen in the episode. That was unbelievable. It was great to see Bora. So excited. But Andrew, to go back, episode 4, watching this, I was actually surprised. It surprised me that Bahrain even did the tour. And I was trying to think. My wife was saying, like, no, if KCP, like, let's say the Nuggets' 5th best player died, they'd say, like, oh, that's really sad, and they'd keep playing in the playoffs. But I don't know. I found it shocking. I didn't quite absorb it at the time, but to have a rider pass away from racing 2 weeks before, and then just be like, yeah, we got to race, like that, it sunk in for me during that episode. And I know, like, Patrick Bro, who knew Gino Mater personally, didn't like the Gino Mater stuff in this and thought it was a little exploitative, but for me, I thought it drove home kind of how much these guys were going through and then how much success meant to them, which I didn't absorb in the moment when the race was happening.
Yeah, I think that one of my takeaways from season 2 of Unchained, which overall I liked, I think there are definitely flaws, but I think it gets at just that, like how much this means to these guys, the level of sacrifice that they put into doing it, and then also just the psychological drama and the ups and downs they're going through day to day and what they're psychologically experiencing. And I mean, I think 2 people came out of this season really with some reputational damage. Honestly, probably doesn't matter to American fans. We're not going to have a big impact on the value of these riders, but I mean, I have to think Ben O'Connor's value has gone way, way down. I just think other teams getting a look at his psychology, I just feel like he's less employable and he's going to get a lower salary in the future. And we talked about this a bit last time, and he was really close friends with Gino. So, but just as the series went on, you kind of like, at least I did, I kind of forgot that unless I consciously reminded myself, like, hey, one of this guy's best friends died 2 weeks before he went to race the tour, where he then psychologically imploded and radically underperformed, and then participated in this TV show that I think damaged his reputation pretty severely.
Well, he did sign a contract right before the show aired with Jayco. So
yeah,
he got in under the wire. Because there's the, what would you say, like prima donna stuff or just temper stuff, and you could write that off and say, oh, like that's just how high performers are. But, on the Puy de Dôme stage, they really focused a lot on that stage. And then they didn't show any of the GC action, right? Or did I miss that? Like Puy de Dôme was all about, like, that was a major GC day where it looked like Pogacar was unbeatable. Vindigo was on the ropes. I don't think they covered that at all in the show, but apologies for the major close watchers out there if I'm rumbling over anything. But Ben O'Connor, like halfway up the climb, Felix Gall's doing really well. His teammate, first time tour starter. Ben O'Connor's like, it's over. And he just gives up. He's like, there's no point. And the team car's trying to urge him to ride on. Like, that's bad, I think. Yeah. I mean, that's not, like, the director tries to say, like, this is important. Kind of like how would you explain to, like, your son or something, or your daughter in, like, youth sports? Like, no, it's important to try, even if things aren't going your way. Like, I was shocked that they had to do that.
Yeah, it's totally shocking at a highest level of professional sport to see somebody be a quitter, basically, and complain. Yeah.
And like have the director be like, no, you got to finish this because it's important.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I don't care that he'd already signed another contract. It's, if nothing else, it's not a good look. And that you're on this TV show while you're behaving this way.
Well, here's counterpoint to this. And I didn't think of this myself, but Patrick Bro jostled my memory. So, like, their highest paid rider is not Ben O'Connor. It's probably Benoit Cosnefroy. Benoit Cosnefroy was at the tour last year, didn't do anything. And I don't know if you saw this video. I think it was from stage 20. He's like in the gruppetto. He probably should be challenging for the stage win. His friends are on the side of the road. He stops his bike and then just like, he's like slamming beers and like dancing with them. But it's like, and the video is shared like, look how fun this is. But it's like, can you imagine being a sponsor and seeing that? This man is making 7 figures, I bet. To like party on the side of the road on a stage he probably should be contesting. And like, that doesn't get covered at all in this series. So I thought O'Connor took it a little hard. And if you were going to defend him, you'd say Benoit Cosnefroy got a bit of a pass there.
If we were to jump ahead to the Thibaut Pinot episode, which I believe was episode 8, right?
Yeah, last one. Great episode.
But I mean, I think that really underscores how do French sponsors look at the value that their riders are delivering. Somehow Pinot is a hero in France. Like, he has a very devoted following. They like that he actually rides in this, what I would call nonsensical style for within the context of modern cycling. But he's all about heart and doing things that actually don't make sense. And that's part of what his fans really like about him, that he rides with passion. Matteo also very different management style, different approach to running a team. And he himself, like, highly, highly emotional and volatile in a way that doesn't really seem to benefit his riders, but, passionate. And so I think when it comes to these French teams, I think the sponsors are maybe seeing value in a different way, and somebody stopping on the side of the road and slamming some beers, maybe that's good for them. Maybe they're like, hey, great.
Well, I guess I heard the team management was pretty upset about it, but they didn't. I wish they would have shown that in the show. But the thing about Pinot, I guess it's nice he's trying. You can imagine being drawn to that, especially if you're French and you feel. I don't want.
I mean, just like CC Thomas Vogler. I mean, there's a long tradition of this. Although I would say
no
I don't in any way want to equate Pinot's last tour with Thomas Vogler, because I think Pinot was definitely a cut above. He did take it seriously. He did really want to win that stage. I did think that, like, watching back, I remember watching that stage and at the time thinking, if this guy wants to win this stage, like, why is he going this early? Because he's just going to get mowed down on the final climb. I don't know. I couldn't really think of a scenario where he actually would have won that stage. And then it was interesting to be inside the team cars of Jumbo and UAE, who clearly were like, we're just mowing this dude down. Like, and then to see Mark Matteo seem to actually think Pinot like really did have some chance. Like, he just like, he can just do something magical on it. It's like, no way, man.
He's got 35 seconds to the base of the climb. He can hold him off. I rewatching it in this show kind of made me think, I was equally confused watching it live. Kind of made me think the goal was, at least in the back of his mind, knowing these guys are too good, because they are very good. These guys are too good. I just need to get over the penultimate climb, because that was like where the Pinot corner was. I kind of thought that was the goal, and like getting that moment, like, that's special. I actually can't imagine riding through that. That would be unbelievable. But then that kind of raises a lot of things actually bothered me about that episode, because it's like Pinot rides with his heart and his soul. It's like, well, he can only afford to do that because he's so stinking good. Like, the guy is unbelievably talented. And like, to even be like, I'm going to get in the break. I want to win this stage. This is the last stage I can win. I'm just going to get in the break. Like, that's so hard. Almost no one can do that. Like, by the end of a Grand Tour, there's like 10 people that can get on a breakaway. So like, it's because he's so talented that he can almost like slum it and race that way. But then that's why he's beloved. But if he was really maximizing his potential, he would be Enric Mas, you know what I mean? Who like no one is inspired by, but he actually races. He gets the most out of his ability as possible. Like, in another world, Enric Mas is falling behind in the GC, sniping breakaways. Oh, he tried, but he didn't win. Like, everyone wants him to attack. It's like, if Enric Mas attacks, he's going to get dropped because he's already going all out. So, you know, I don't know, but I guess people like that. There's something to respect about Pinot racing that way. But I found myself like speaking out loud to Orla, like, Orla, he can only do that because he's so good and he's talented and he's not actually getting the most out of his talent. On that episode, I was shocked at the beer gate. I thought that comment was a little like out of left field from Richard Pluga about, and I don't think he said that FDJ was drinking beers. I just think he said, I saw people drinking beers in the hotel, and then they got all upset about it. But if they wouldn't have said anything, no one actually would have known it was them. But I just thought it was kind of a funny comment that he made. I almost thought he was joking about it. I guess he wasn't when you see him in the show, but that really affected Matteo. Like, he was really upset about the insinuation that his riders are drinking beer on the rest day. Were you shocked by that?
I wasn't that shocked by it, knowing what I know of Matteo as a public figure and just kind of how he approaches life and maybe how he's composed emotionally. What struck me as really odd about the whole thing within the context of Unchained is clearly they have the footage. So like, let's go to the footy. Let's see what actually, right? Like, what actually went down. I actually thought the fact that they did not show the footage suggested to me that Pinot probably had a beer. So that was my thought. And then like, why did Pluga do it? I think that a lot of people, including some people that you know personally, Spencer, have not, but for whatever reason, they don't like Matteo. And I don't know, he seems to rub some people the wrong way. And I wonder if there's like a bit of that with Pluga, and Pluga just wanted to needle the guy and knew he could really wind him up. So I think there was a bit of that. And then what I thought was interesting was when Matteo came into the team dinner and he started, you know, going on about honor and like, they've questioned our honor. And I could kind of see Pinot sitting there looking down, almost like he was out at a restaurant with his dad and his dad had done something embarrassing. You know what I mean? He's like, oh God, here we go again. Right.
Yeah. The thing about Matteo that I've thought a lot about this. So like, we're flying around episode 6, Jonas Vingegaard dominates the time trial, you know, great performance. Frankly, what I would have done if I was Visma is just, his power data is public for the whole tour, because what you would have seen if that was the case, it's this really stupid argument. It's like, well, through the first 15 stages, he only took 10 seconds and then he took a minute and 38 seconds in one stage. So he's doping. Well, it's like, just release the power and you would see that his power is constant. The only thing that changed is Tade's power dipped on stage 16, probably because he was put under so much pressure through the first 15 stages. And that's why he lost a bunch of time in one stage. And also, you take time in time trials. All right. You can't compare a time trial to the rest of this freaking race. Right. It drove me nuts when that was said in the show. But I mean, you could argue like, well, you're using PEDs to keep your power from dipping, and that would be true. But I just think from a surface level, that'd be a good place to work. It would work from, it would show people like, oh, he wasn't amazing on stage 16 in a way that he wasn't amazing on stage 9, or, you know, when they went up Puy de Dome, him and Pogacar were putting out massive numbers, and no one said, oh, they're doping then, because they were putting out equal numbers. But Pogacar, there's a world where he does the time trial, you know, 15 seconds behind Jonas Vingegaard on stage 16, and we're not having this discussion. But when Matteo says like, oh, in 20 years, we'll test the samples and we'll know, that's factually true. So you can like, you know, that is a response. You could say, like, well, I don't know if they're doping or not. We'll find out, because we always find out everything, unless it's to do with Miguel Indurain, then it's swept under the rug because he's so stinking nice that no one ever wants to say anything about him. But that would annoy me if I was Richard Pluga and the competitor said that about my athlete's performance, and assuming it was clean. I guess even if it wasn't clean, it would still annoy me.
Yeah, of course.
And so that's probably where the comment was coming from.
Completely. I think that's a huge part of it. And it's also interesting to me how Beergate was a big thing during the race. It's a big focus during Unchained. I think something that hasn't been talked about enough, and there was focus on it in Unchained. I, in the moment last year, knew that this was an important factor in the race, but now watching Unchained, stalled vehicles played such a critical role in some of the most important outcomes in the 2023 Tour de France. It's just absolutely wild to me. And I keep thinking about these scenarios of what if the vehicles didn't stall? What if the motorcycles didn't stall? Do we have a Carlos Rodriguez stage victory? I don't think so.
Probably not.
No way. And even I was thinking back to when I watched it last year, because I watched that stage live. It was riveting. I had no idea, honestly, that had happened. So I don't know if that was just ASO TV feed or France TV that they cut away from it because a French rider was getting dropped somewhere in the race at that moment that we needed to see, or what happened. But there was that. And then, of course, when Pog attacked, and, clearly Jonas and Pog were in different places during that tour. I still wonder, though, had Pog smashed Jonas on that stage when he attacked and ran into the back of the stalled motorcycle, like, let's say he gets away and puts some amount of time into Jonas, wins the stage, just from a psychological point of view, I think it transforms the race and we potentially have a different outcome, honestly.
Maybe, and that's a fun way to think. It's like a fun thought experiment. I think maybe my more boring theory is that he maybe would have gotten caught by Jonas anyway, and then his descending was a little subpar that whole tour, probably because of the wrist. I think Jonas might have caught him on that descent because, as you say, Rodriguez catches them, goes right around him. George Hincapie, I was watching the race with him, said it's a Cat 5 mistake right there. You cannot let someone come around you at the top of a climb, especially with speed, especially when basically the race is to the top of the climb, because when you're descending down into Morzine, it's whoever is on the front on that descent is going to win the stage. And it was Pogacar that let the gap go. He couldn't keep up with Rodriguez, so he probably would have gotten caught by Jonas. But it's fun to imagine, because it takes us to what stage was that? Stage 6, I believe, where he cracked on Col de Delos. I did not know that was so mental. The way that they framed that and the way he was even talking about that stage, it kind of felt like he was just defeated from stage 16, from the time trial, and just everything in his body, like his mind then had his body give out because he knew that he couldn't win the tour. So that did paint a picture for me where it's like, maybe if a few things do go differently, he doesn't lose what was like 5 minutes or something on one stage. The gaps, I guess, were closer than the final GC would have you believe.
So
physically,
on Col de Luz, something that's not brought up in that episode that my business partner, David Lorsch, reminded me of when we were talking about this episode of Unchained. Shout out to David. It was 102 degrees that day, and they didn't talk about the impact of the heat. Granted, every rider was riding in the same heat. I do wonder if part of why Pog cracked was something heat related. And yes, it did present as psychologically, he was like, I'm effed, I'm dead, or whatever he said. But 102 degrees on that mountain.
102 on the mountain? Where did David get this?
I'm looking at it right now. I looked it up. It's in coverage from last year.
I guess in the valleys that's possible. But Lowe's is high. It's like an 8,000 foot mountain pass, maybe even higher. So I guess, though, probably in the valleys it was cooking. And if it's hot in a mountain valley, it's really uncomfortable. So it probably could have something to do with it. Remember that was supposed to be Pogacar's weakness, heat. You could be onto something. You've tied the unifying theory together.
Yeah, I mean, yes, you're right. On an 8,000 foot mountain, it's going to be less hot higher up the mountain. However,
but I guess that damage was done.
You do have to go through the valley to get there. Yes. Okay, so the Independent had a great piece from Lawrence Ostler. Yeah, on the the day following that stage, just about like how people were dealing with the heat. And I don't remember what the temperature was like prior to that stage. I'm sure it was hot on other days, but again, if you're not heat adapted, people respond to heat differently, and who knows, maybe Jonas responds to heat differently and better than Pog, and maybe that'll be a factor in this year's tour.
Well, I mean, I'm sitting, not far from the base of the Alps, and it's a hot day, and like I can feel a cold breeze, coming through. And like if you look at like everyone's up in the Alps right now for these pre-Tour de France altitude camps, they're riding through like walls of snow, which would indicate to you it's probably not that hot up there. And then you go to the tour where you're riding, low elevations for a lot of the race, and it is hot. It actually, I kind of wonder if in 20 years they'll be doing alpine training camps, or if they'll all be trucking out to Boulder. Probably be 150 degrees in June by then. The rate things are heating up, but you can ride at high elevations in Colorado that time of year with a lot of heat, which I would think is probably better to prepare for the tour. Contact me if you want me to expand on this theory, if you're a professional team. But the travel would probably be a bit of an issue. But yeah, I mean, the heat, the whole thing, I think at the time I was like, oh, he lost the time in the time trial. Of course he stunk on the hardest day of the race. That's it. But, I think you were texting, like, I forgot that Jonas won by a 7.5 minute margin,
that was
whatever it was.
Insane.
But a lot of that, I guess, was like piled on. It was like him running up the score when things really didn't matter. Also, you talk about things being different. If that motorcycle doesn't stall, I rewatched that scene like 10 times. It almost looked like he just stopped. I'm not sure why. Maybe he was worried he's going to run someone over. If that doesn't happen, he wins that stage. It's probably the best thing for him he didn't win it, because that would have like gotten people pretty against him. It's like, so you crush the time trial, you'll blow up the GC, and then you're mowing down Felix Gall for what reason? So it's probably better for him that moto incident happened.
Yeah, fair point.
And I'm trying to think. Oh, so before we go, I'm gonna have to go soon. Episode 5, the Team Sky episode, The Enemy Within. I had a lot to say about this when I watched it, and I have even more to say about it as it sunk in. I guess the general outline of the show is like Ineos comes in. They showed like a pre-Tour de France meeting where it's basically this podcast where they're like, yeah, I don't know, we wish we had someone that was good, but we don't. So let's just see what happens. And they go in, it's just this amorphous blob, and I would say it's messier than you would think. Am I wrong there? Like, it's a total mess within the team. They're not telling anyone like any directions. It's just like, hey, do you want to work with Carlos? Because he's doing pretty good. Oh, you don't want to work with him? Okay. But here's the oddest thing about that episode in retrospect. So it's before the Grand Colombier stage. Steve Cummings, the race director, goes to Tom Pidcock while he's getting a massage. I don't know if this happened, like maybe this was movie magic. He's like, hey, Carlos Rodriguez is ahead of you. Do you want to work for him? And Tom Pidcock's like, no, I don't. I'm not ready to do that. And it's supposed to make you think Tom Pidcock's like hard to control, doesn't want to work for the team. I looked it up. He was only ahead of him by like 55 seconds at the time. And then Tom Pidcock took time the next day and got within 42 seconds of Carlos Rodriguez. Seems a little early to be asking someone just to blow up their tour for another rider, especially when you don't know how Carlos Rodriguez is going to respond in what I believe was his first Tour de France. And Tom Pidcock thinks he's going to get better. Of course, we all know that Tom Pidcock fell apart on the Juplon stage, the stage to Morzine that Rodriguez won. But at the time, they didn't know that. Like, I just thought that was kind of weird in retrospect, the more I thought about it. And I even started to wonder if that was the order of operations, or if they were showing us later conversations and inserting them earlier to make Pidcock look even more like a bad teammate.
Yeah. And also think about at the management level of the team, there was a lot of drama. So Rod Ellingworth ends up leaving Team Ineos at the end of 2023. His boss, Dave B, parachutes in. Right.
Dude, that was weird. You could feel how uncomfortable they were. To the scream. Dave B, who they haven't heard, this is like inside information, unverified information, but take it how you will. They couldn't get a hold of him, not answering the phone for months. So like they're running the team without him. Dave B parachutes in. They're asking each other, like, is Dave coming today? Have you heard from Dave? Is Dave coming? Shows up, like, big man on campus, running around, fist bumping the riders. So good to see you in the car. I would say acting, if I run into Dave B in the next few minutes, it might be uncomfortable, but I would say acting a fool in the car. Like, it's just, if I was a rider and I'm like hearing this guy like trying to pump me up, like, dude, go back to running your soccer team. But apparently he came in and he's like, all right, who are we signing for next year? And they're like, yeah, we've been doing work for months. Ron Ellingworth has been constructing the team for next year. And they lay it out. He's like, nah, I don't want that. And that's why you had all that weirdness where, like, Carlos Ferrano was supposed to be on the team, and they had to call him and be like, hey, Carlos, you're not on the team next year because the decision was made. And same thing with,
right?
Yeah, the Remco weirdness. And then Tobias Foss, they signed, and then Dave Brailsford comes to the tour and says, nah, don't sign him. I don't want to sign him. And then so they have to tell him, hey, contract is off. And then they like rework it in the offseason, and that's why that signing happened so late. This is allegedly because Brailsford came into that tour stage and was just like, no, I haven't looked at the team for 4 months, but I don't like all this. Like, let's do it differently. And you can feel like no one feels empowered to make decisions. And that, I think that's partly why it's such a mess. And, it's not servicing riders like Pidcock or Rodriguez. I don't think Pidcock is the enemy. I think he was kind of scapegoated in this and kind of purposely made to look bad. And he kind of has a prickly personality when things aren't going his way. But I can't sit here and say I would look good on camera if I came into the tour and it wasn't doing that well and cameras are following me around.
Yeah, and if we were to identify the red thread here running through every competitor at the Tour de France, and in particular, the very best competitors at the Tour de France, and to be even more specific, the very best competitors at the Tour de France, when they're not winning everything, which is you're going to win very few bike races, even when you're the very best bike racer in the world. That's just how it goes. These guys are killers. They want to win everything. And I mean, that's what we see with Wout, what we see with Pidcock, Pog, Jonas. No mercy. They just want to win. And that's part of what makes this sport so compelling and interesting to watch. The lengths they'll go to win, how bad they want to do it. And of course, Pidcock wants to win. Like, all the guy wants to do is win. And I think if we were to think about 2023 Unchained season 1, the same theme came up with Wout, where it's like, you gotta let Wout ride. It's let Rodman go to Vegas corollary. Certain players, like, you have to let them do whatever they want if you want to have them on your team. And if you don't let them do that, then they're leaving your team and they're going somewhere else where their behavior will be tolerated, basically.
Yeah, and I mean, to tie this all back together before I have to go, this goes back to like one of the first things you said about UAE. Like, if Ineos is going to Tom Pidcock before the tour and saying, Carlos is the leader, do you want to go to the tour and support him? If it's phrased that way and framed that way, he might be more on board. Then you're a leader, which I don't know how they're going to do this with 4, maybe 5 guys acting as leaders at this tour. Anyone who thinks Geraint Thomas is coming not to ride for Geraint Thomas, I got news for you. Geraint Thomas is riding for Geraint Thomas. I mean, he served his domestique time. I think he's over that. He gave a lot of good years of his career away working for other people, probably when he shouldn't have. But it adds so much ambiguity around it. Whereas if you just set the expectations right from the gun, it makes it a lot easier, I think, to control big personalities like that. Because I can guarantee you, like, Juan Ayuso is not going into this race thinking, I'm going to have a chance of winning. If I do well in the time trial, I'm the leader. He might be thinking, if Tadej has an unfortunate accident, maybe I'm going to get called up, but that's not the main aim of his race because it's been communicated to him.
No, he knows the part he's supposed to play within the team. He's happy to do it. He's well compensated. That's why he's there. There's no discussion about it. End of story. And I think that's how a team can be most effective, is when people are empowered within their roles to be the very best at their role. And I think at the highest level of competition for a team, if you're setting up a power struggle because you're not providing boundaries for people to excel in their appropriate role or the role that they're there for, then it's just not going to go well.
Yeah. So to rate this show, better than the first season, not as good as the first season, better than you expected, not as good as you expected?
I know you got to go. We didn't get to this. I want to ask you a question. What do you think about Jasper Philipsen following season 2 of Unchained?
Dude, well, I would say he did not come off that well. Episode 7 is what we're referring to. I mean, I saw it at the time, so I wasn't surprised to see it this time. I think the sprinting stuff is like fine, whatever. You got to be an asshole to win sprints. Like, it's crazy. You know, I didn't win a lot of sprints because I'm just not willing to ride people off the road. But I kind of admire, like, I don't know. I kind of admire people who are just like Justin Williams. Like, I'm going to take this guy to the curb and crash him. Like, I've just never been able to do that. I would say the mid-stage stuff, that was out of line. Like, you know, I think what was it, Victor Campenarts or someone like that was trying to bridge up to the breakaway.
You don't put your hands on Victor Campenarts.
Don't touch our Victor. And it's stage 18, I think, where he was bridging up because his team kept the gap too close. I don't know why teams do this. They keep the gap way too close. Then it lets new riders bridge up. It gives them new legs, and they can ride to the finish, which is exactly what happened that day. But going up the road and trying to block him one-on-one, it was like, you know, it's like a point guard trying to get by a defender in the middle of the race. It was frankly weird and bizarre. I think Quickstep said like Philipsen doing this stupid shit or something like that, and I think that sums it up pretty well. But, you know, you got to be a psycho. Like, even his team manager, Christoph Rudhoff, was basically like in the team bus in the last episode. Like, this guy's out of his mind.
Totally. I love that.
It's just you have to accept that if someone's winning sprints at that rate, they're not the nicest person in the world at that point. Not to say they're not a good person, just at that point in their career and their lives, they're in an FU.
Yeah, we don't have access to Mathieu van der Poel's contract. I want to see what he's getting paid to let someone else win stages, because Mathieu van der Poel could completely, like last year, he could have been winning stages. I don't think.
Well, I don't know. I think he sneaky bad form at some of these grand tours. Like, remember the tour the year before? He couldn't even ride at the front, and then we found out later he was like basically training for the world championship.
Right, because he was training. So, I don't think it was an accident what we saw the prior year. So I believe Van der Poel's marked, Wout's marked. Everyone who people know have that next level of ability, they're going to be marked. And I could certainly have seen scenarios where Van der Poel could have picked up at least one, if not two stages in the 2023 tour. And I just feel like he must be getting paid bonuses based on Jasper winning, or like there have to be team oriented bonuses. And the Rudhoofs are sophisticated enough and playing like at another level of team management. I think that they might have a bonus system in place like that, or I don't know, maybe Zwift is paying him. Who knows? Somebody's giving that guy money to enable other people.
It's also possible like Canyon is just paying him a ton of money, and they're sophisticated enough to he knows they're not going to come to him and be like, hey, you didn't win any stages of the tour. What was that about? That like they know that Philipsen winning on a Canyon is good for Canyon, and thus it makes Van der Poel worth the money. I'm curious to see how it plays out this year, because will he be okay forever not winning?
That's what I'm saying, because he was portrayed as footloose and fancy free, and Unchained. That's not how this guy is.
What does he have, like one tour stage win in his career?
He wants,
like, that's not enough.
He wants to win more stages. Like, I don't believe that he's okay with his current palmares as it relates to the tour.
I'm glad you brought up this Philipsen issue. It reminded me of, so stage 18, Casper Asgreen wins. Super interesting guy.
Yeah, definitely.
Kind of honestly wish they focused more on this. Did you see him, like, you know, training at home, living in Denmark, not doing the Monaco shuffle, which I was impressed by, paying probably 60% top marginal income tax rate. Holy smokes. And then like the bike setup, washing his bike. Like, I want to know more about that. Like, I just feel like the show should lean more into like, what's Matej Mohoric doing at home? How's he setting his bike up? What's his training like when he's at home? Like, I feel like that's where it could have been a little bit stronger. And then obviously Matej Mohoric winning stage 19. That was incredible when it happened. That was incredible in the show. They edited his speech slightly. His speech was probably better in real life, but that was a great episode in general.
Well,
I think it was a little bit like, woe is Soudal Quickstep, where it's like, well, what was Julian Alaphilippe doing here? Like, it was not like, oh, Fabian Jakobsen's gone. Now we have nobody. It's like, well, you have like a 2-time world champion and one of the best classics riders in the world.
It was bananas. So just to focus on Mohoric for a second, part of what I really liked about the portrayal of Mohoric, who, I mean, the more I learn about this guy, the more I love him. I've been a big fan for a while. Just his level of attention to detail and preparation and the way he's thinking about bike racing. I mean, he was talking about physics, weather, equipment, just totally dialed. He's like the anti Thibaut Pinot. He's like so dialed in, right?
Yes.
Actually, Mohoric, I've said this before, but he really reminds me of Adam Hansen. And I think that he's just like at the very forefront of technology and body position, everything. So it's very interesting to see how he thinks about what he's doing in a bike race, always thinking about energy expenditure, wind direction, physics, momentum. Just that's where bike racing is headed, in addition to everything that's happening with nutrition and training. So I really enjoyed getting to hear how he thinks about and prepares to do what he does. And that, it was just incredible. The stage he won, almost getting gobbled up by the Peloton, but staying away. Those are some of my very favorite stages, when you just, as the breakaway is coming into the finale, you can see the sprinters right behind them about to gobble them up, and they stay away. Just like, those are the moments I think of the absolute highest drama in a Grand Tour. And I love it so much more than, I mean, I just don't like individual time trials at all.
Time trials, you love them. It's your passion.
Yeah.
I did think it was, I guess I knew it, but I was also shocked by it, where he's like, oh, I was in pain because I was staying in my aero position for, I'm looking at the stage right now. The stage was 3.5 hours long. That's how they went 172K in 3.5 hours.
Nuts.
I was absolutely flying. But just like the physical work you have to do off the bike to even be able to hold that position. I think you said this a few weeks ago, like, instead of getting an aero bike, the uncomfortable truth, the literally uncomfortable truth, is that you just have to work on stretching and your strength to be able to ball yourself up for hours at a time. Like, that's how these guys are going this fast. Like, obviously their wheels are fast, their bikes are fast, but they're not that fast. Like, your body is the big part of, oh boy, we're getting 80%. Arrested. It's the Thibaut, police are coming after us. But it did kind of make me think, like, obviously Pinot looks so unaero on a bike, and just, he never really focused on that. And then also, I kept thinking with this farm, I'm like, no wonder like this guy can't win a Grand Tour. Like, that's a lot of work. Like, I can't imagine trying to be a pro and then like taking care of a farm. Like, just never seemed like he wanted that, which I guess is why he retired. He retired at a very high level, by the way. I was kind of surprised. It was dawning on me as I was watching it. Like, there's not many riders that retire at the level of Pinot. It would be like Valverde and then maybe Armstrong the first time, but obviously that didn't take.
Yeah, Pinot's not coming off the farm.
No, he's probably out there right now. You're not getting him out of there. We'll talk about Tour de France. Oh, did you like the show?
Yeah. I thought it was good. I started to lose interest the deeper it got into it. And then I think in particular, the portrayal of the sprinting dynamics just is boring to me at this point. I think you summarized it really effectively. You have to do certain things in order to excel at that specific sub-discipline of road racing, and that's just what it takes, so arguments around that, I was like, okay, this is the second year in a row of this. It's going to happen every year at the Tour forever. So that just was a bit dull to me.
It's going to happen in
and I did
a week and a half, I guarantee.
When it got into some of the areas exploring more of the specific details of preparation and psychology and what are these people like as humans, like with Mohoric and actually with Askren as well, something that he said really struck me. He said, hey, if you're pinning on a number and you show up at the race, like, you have a chance to win. I was like, that guy is a winner. That is the way a champion thinks. I just love that stuff. I thought that was incredible.
Yeah. I mean, I think people underestimate that. And then to tie it back to the beer, if it's stage, what was that second rest day? It was like stage, I think it was after the time trial, maybe? No. After stage 15, going into a time trial, Then it's like mountain stage, those breakaway stages. I would bet you a lot of riders are checked out. You know, it's like, I can't do anything in this race. Why not have a beer? Why wouldn't I have a beer? But, you know, what if Casper Asgreen would have gotten drunk on the rest day? He probably doesn't win that stage. You know, it's like, you just have to believe that you can win. And a lot of guys don't. You know, it's actually a rare mindset, shockingly rare.
Yeah. Yeah. If Asgreen had been overdoing keg stands with Matteo and his crew.
You know, partying with his friends on the side of the road. Actually, I still can't believe that happened, and that didn't get more like flack. That was unbelievable. But we'll talk about the Tour de France start list, which I think all the teams released their rosters today. But we'll let the takes fly, and then we'll come in over the top next week. I don't think any of us are surprised that, at least amongst the two of us, that Wout and Jonas are going for Visma. I think that was kind of assumed. I have to assume they think Jonas is healthy, or else they wouldn't send him. Richard Pluga doesn't seem like a guy to fly by the seat of his pants, so I'm going to defer to Pluga's judgment there, even though it seems a little rushed. But again, we don't know anything. We don't really know how he's doing physically or how his training's going.
Yeah, we just know that GC Wout is here. It's going down. Get ready.
And I would say if people think we're nuts about this, but if he's in the jersey going into the time trial or after the time trial, things could get interesting on that team from that point on.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Andrew. I've got to get back to managing the jet-lagged children, but childcare is coming next week. So we'll get back together before the race and get into these start lists, which I actually have some big questions about some of the teams.